Morning, everyone. It is delightful to be here. My name is Shauna Sylvester, and I was here 2 years ago when you were, for those of you who were here, and it's been wonderful to watch Renewable Cities emerge as a real movement. I am excited to welcome two incredible change makers in this field, two incredible leaders, and I'd like to welcome former mayor of Rio de Janeiro, the former head of the C40. For those of you who don't know C40, it is that global movement of cities that are really pushing the edges of sustainability and addressing climate change. Eduardo Paes, welcome. And someone that needs no introduction in this stage and in this city, of course, our mayor, Gregor Robertson, who has, I recall, 2 months before we hosted Renewable Cities in 2015, you made the commitment as the city to go 100% renewable. So it's great to have him here. Please have a seat. So this is, I get to interview these two incredible change makers, and then you get to ask questions. So we're going to have about 20 minutes in conversation, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor, and we'll have people with roving mics. And I hope you will challenge them and ask them the big questions that are burning for you, because that's the intent of Renewable Cities. Oh, challenge the mayor. Yeah, okay.
We're not in Brazil. We are in.
We are in Brazil, and I understand you know, this is a big time in Brazil. So. Yes. So for all of those of you from Brazil that are watching the politics, thank you for being here and not at your televisions, as I understand.
And don't jump from the higher floor here in the hotel.
So we are at a moment in time, and it was wonderful to hear the Director General of IRENA talk a little bit about that moment in time. But I want to get a sense from you as the former head of C40, Eduardo, and you, Mayor Robertson, as a mayor working through 100% renewable. Could you name this moment in time right now for cities working on climate change? Eduardo, let's begin with you.
I mean, I think it's pretty much what was said here just a few minutes ago. I mean, it's I see that as an amazing moment. I mean, since when you look at Copenhagen in 2009 and what cities and the role of cities on climate change issues is, I mean, you can count almost 10,000. When you look at C40 cities, you can count almost 10,000 actions of C40 cities, including Vancouver, that completely, that has to do with climate change. Cities, they get the worst and the best of it. I mean, cities are responsible for, I don't know, maybe 70% of the emissions. They are the ones that suffer most. I mean, that's clear for everyone. It's always something that we repeat all the time. This is becoming more and more urbanized world. So the challenge of the cities, it's an amazing challenge, and the role of the cities and the local governments. I mean, sometimes there are regional governments that play a big role, but mostly mayors. I was telling Mayor Robertson, I mean, if I could stay as a mayor, I would stay as a mayor. I mean, there's this thing about mayors should be ruling the world. I mean, we are closer to people, we are more connected, and the impact that we can achieve, I mean, it's not only the matter of carbon emissions. It has to do also with resilience. I mean, there was something, I think, what moves us here. I was never in my previous year's history as an environmentalist, you know, connected to sustainability. But once I became mayor, when you see the real life, what climate change can, the harm that climate change can do to the everyday life of the people, to the everyday life of the citizens, that's a big thing. So, I mean, the challenge of mayors, it's an amazing challenge. We have, I mean, they have, I'm not a we anymore, but they have, they need money, support. I mean, there's a paper that was delivered by C40, we call it Deadline 2020. And I mean, the amount of money that the cities need to get things done, it's a huge amount of money. In the next 4 years, we're talking about $250 billion. So it's a lot of money, and I'm talking about the main cities. But the beauty of cities is that they are more accountable. The targets can be more clear. You can come to the mayor of Vancouver and say, okay, you need to change the transportation, and we deal with the things that can make a big difference. I mean, transportation, waste management, and this and that. So lightning, there's a big hole that mayors play. So again, I think it's an amazing moment. And just one last comment. What I feel, I think that the hard situations are always great opportunities. I mean, the position that, I mean, we're still in expecting what's going to happen with Trump's administration. But if you look at the role that American mayors can play now, I mean, they're saying that, I mean, actually led by Eric Garcetti, by Roy Emanuel, by Bill de Blasio, even, as was said here, Mayor Bloomberg, I mean, in spite of the fact he's not mayor anymore, he keeps leading that action, say, okay, if he doesn't want to do it, we're going to do it in our cities. And that shows the power, the strength that mayors have. So you guys here in Canada, and especially in Vancouver, can be tough on this guy here because he can make a change. So good to be out of office.
So Mayor Robertson, what's the moment for you?
Well, I agree with everything that Eduardo says. It's an amazing moment. It is also full of intense challenge right now. We're dealing with a fossil fuel industry that is much like the tobacco companies in previous years, or if you go back farther, leaded paint or asbestos, different industries that have literally been incredibly dangerous to health and safety, and now in this case to the health of the planet. The fossil fuel industry is fighting, in a corner to survive, and it's who gets the last run of cash out of that industry before renewables completely take over, which is what we all need to happen. We desperately need it to happen to protect the climate of our planet. We need to make sure our cities are clean, and you see the air pollution in China and India in particular. There are a lot of cities right now that are struggling, unbelievable struggle, and loss of human life and damage that's happening, and they're not at the tipping point yet. They're waiting for national governments and utilities to change and dramatically shift off of fossil fuels, and they can do what they can on their own, but the growth pressures in Asian cities in particular right now, the transportation problems resulting from that as people want to be in cars, there are huge challenges faced by mayors and cities around the world right now. So it's a very difficult time for many cities. Some of our cities, like Vancouver, we started this shift generations ago when hydroelectricity was put in place. That's got us over 30% renewable energy. Our electricity is renewable almost completely. So we've done that. We've cleaned up industry within the city. We've seen a remarkable decline in people driving cars. In the last 10 years, we've seen about a 30% reduction in the number of kilometers that people are driving. So we've seen people make good choices with transportation. We've seen energy efficiency and a strong building code that we control here in the city. And we've seen utilities shifting. So we're at the leading edge of it. We see a lot of the advantages, job creation, it's healthier for everybody. But there are many cities that are still right stuck in the most difficult time when they're totally reliant on fossil fuels. Their population growth, car growth is off the charts, and they're extremely polluted. So I don't think we can underestimate how tough it will be for cities to get over the hump. And those of us that have been successful along the way, I mean, Rio has made enormous progress under your leadership. In the years, people prior didn't really think of Rio as a clean and green city, and you worked tirelessly with your team to shift that and to make sure that that's a top priority for the city. Increasingly it's happening in big cities around the world, but there's a long ways to go still. the good thing is there's momentum. There's this connection of all the mayors and cities around the world. There's networks that are very strong right now. And there's a global standard in terms of emissions. The Global Covenant of Mayors it's over 7,500 cities and communities around the world that are now reporting on a common standard and focused on the solutions. So it's an exciting and amazing time, but we have to keep our eye on the ball and make sure we are helping the cities who are struggling the most.
So let's go back to that time. I was in Rio. I mean, not in Rio. I was in Paris with you, and I watched what happened in Paris. So with the mayors, there seemed to be a shift in what was happening. 1,000 mayors got together, and in the document that they signed, they made commitments. And the commitment that was on the paper was 100% renewable. That was huge. I wonder if you can take us to that shift that you've seen just in the last 2 years globally with mayors. And you've started to talk a little bit about that, Mayor Robertson, but I'd also like to get your sense, Eduardo, in terms of what you're seeing as a global movement.
I mean, obviously, I mean, let me try to put things into a point here. Mayor Robertson was being nice to Rio, or what we did there. I mean, and the beauty of what we're talking about here is just that. I mean, obviously, when you talk about a global South city like Rio, a big city in a South American country with all the problems that Brazil faces, inequality and lack of infrastructure, and all the problems that we know and happens a lot in the global South, we cannot be compared to Vancouver. I mean, we can be compared on the nature. I mean, it's a cooler Rio de Janeiro, Vancouver, or Rio is it's a warmer Vancouver, whatever. A little bit warmer. But I mean, the beauty of what we do is like institutions like the Common of Mayors, C40, the meeting that we had in Paris 2 years ago, and if you were in Rio, you would like it much better than Paris, in spite of the fact Paris is an amazing city. The beauty of it is that we try to, what we create is amazing networks of cities, and the good examples of even developed world cities like Vancouver, like London, like Copenhagen. You can take these good examples to cities as Rio, or as São Paulo. And there are good actions in global South cities and the developing countries that can be taken to big cities.
True.
Let me give you a clear example. The BRT, it's a Brazilian creation, not in Rio, in Curitiba, important city in the south of the country. So, I mean, mid-80s, important mayor there, Jaime Lerner. So I said, okay, we don't have the money to build subway, so let's start thinking about something here. So let's get these buses together. So what we do is build important solution. Obviously, we need to change to electric buses. You know, that's a lot to be done, still there. But so Rio, using the Olympics as a good excuse, we, in the past 8 years, we created 150 kilometers of BRT lines. So there are solutions. It doesn't matter if you are a developed cities, if you are a developed city, if you are underdeveloped city. There are solutions that can be taken from one city to another. And what I think is when we get meetings in Rio Plus 20 that happened 2012, the meeting on climate change that we had in Rio, C40 played an important role because, you know, when nations get together, I don't want to say bad things about nations here or the United Nations, but I mean, if these guys don't get all of them to agree with a certain comma, a certain dot in the document, it's going to be a huge fight. So we know how it works. I mean, they play an important role. But again, so we played an important role in Rio in 12. But when we got to Paris, it was at the end of 15, and it was reached, the Paris Agreement. But the commitment of cities, and again, the fact that we can have clear targets, that we are, I mean, I'm not a mayor anymore, but I'm for the mayors. So that we are more accountable, that, you know, we do real change in people's lives. I mean, can you imagine what is the difference, what is the impact of something that we do on resilience in a city like Rio, in a tropical country that every summer you have big rainstorms and floods and you have accidents happening because of that, and then you do something that you say, okay, there is this climate change happening, you can do some resilience, you need to live with that, and you can save people's lives. I mean, that's an amazing change. That's something that really gets to people's lives. So, I mean, if you look at examples, bike sharing, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, there was like 10 cities having bike sharing. Everywhere you go, there's bike sharing. It's an amazing thing. You look at operation centers like the one we built in Rio concerning much more a resilience perspective and managing the city. That's something that you see today in a bunch of global south cities, developed world cities. So that's what gets us together, you know, good examples and getting people's lives better, a better future, obviously.
So Mayor Robertson, you've worked a fair bit trying to support that global movement as well. Where do you think it's at?
Well, I think it's healthier than ever, and Paris was a key moment, particularly for cities, and thankfully for nations as well. But I think we were able to all come together at that time and find common ground and commitment moving forward. The challenge with all of this is implementation and commitment, like who's really going to do it, and that's where there's a big difference between what we do in cities, where literally, if you've got flooding, if you've got sea level rise, like if Miami doesn't run their pumps 24/7, they're going underwater. And so there's a necessity to taking action in cities when you see the kind of disasters, extreme weather events that have impacted cities, and the infrastructure costs that are piling up for cities around the world. We have to respond to this, and that's today. That's decisions that we're making every day with the tools that we have. The challenge is national governments, as was said earlier, you know, it's one thing on a whole array of things. They're working on longer term horizons, much more policy versus hands-on frontline activity. So it's a much slower turn. And I think the pressure of the fossil fuel lobby in particular is much more targeted at national governments. The utilities, state and provincial governments deal with it more, I think, than cities. But we're not immune to it. And an example, coming down to the city level here, we have, there's a movie tonight, the Bloomberg Philanthropies has supported on coal at the Park Theater and what the coal industry is doing globally right now. We have a lot of coal exported through Vancouver. We have banned the export of coal through the city of Vancouver proper, but there's a lot around the edges of the city in the metro area that's being exported, primarily metallurgical coal, but thermal coal is trying to get through here. It's being blocked all the way down the west coast by American cities and communities. They're trying to get it out here this is Powder River coal from Wyoming, exporting to burn in China and other parts of Asia. So there's a real threat with coal that's still, it's a real and present danger. In Vancouver itself, we're burning natural gas rather than coal, which has had decades of being branded as a clean fuel. We know it's not a clean fuel for climate. We know it's having devastating impact on climate, notwithstanding fewer particles in the combustion. But we have to get off of natural gas in our buildings, and we have a direct attack on city policy to eliminate fossil fuels by the private utility, by FortisBC and a whole array of aligned groups that are basically attacking us at a local level for our action to phase fossil fuels out in our building code. So with classic tobacco company campaign style, misinformation, all kinds of scare tactics with restaurants and builders. So there's a disturbing amount of activity on the ground in cities to try and stop the progress, to try and interfere with our work to clean up our cities. And you can extrapolate that when you go national. So the pressure is still there on national governments to subsidize and support the fossil fuel industries, regardless of Paris. And I think that's the challenge we face right now. There's the commitments made in Paris are basically eroding away as national governments don't take action, don't regulate, don't drop subsidies to fossil fuels. We have to see that action consistently from the local level right up to national governments, or we're not going to achieve the goals that we all came together and agreed to in Paris.
So before I hand it off to the audience for their questions, I want to ask you each very briefly. One of the greatest challenges, and you've already referred to a number, Mayor Robertson, but the most critical challenge you're facing right now in the implementation, and one opportunity. And I'm going to ask you to be brief on each of those, and you'll be speaking, if you wouldn't mind, from what you see for the Mayor of Rio de Janeiro going forward. One, who would like to be? I'm going to go to you, Mayor Robertson, first.
Me first?
Yeah, and one, briefly, the most important challenge and the greatest opportunity.
Well, I would say the biggest challenge, so I talked about 56% of our emissions right now are from buildings. So right now we have, fortunately, the power to change our building code. We control our building code in Vancouver. We've made it the greenest building code in North America. So we've been very focused on phasing out fossil fuels, on making our buildings much more energy efficient. And there's a huge opportunity for that to make massive change. We're seeing now the largest passive apartment building is being constructed in East Vancouver right now. We're seeing industry embrace the opportunity. Many like world-class professionals in Vancouver and exporting the products and the technologies and services that we need to make our buildings energy efficient and climate friendly and healthy buildings inside. So there's a huge opportunity for the transformation of buildings, and I would say in transportation too, with electric vehicles right now, with the ecosystem that we're building out to charge, with the vehicles that are coming over the next 12 to 24 months. I think we're going to see that tipping point, and finally. And that combo right there will dramatically reduce climate pollution, will be more affordable overall. So it's all good news, and really it's a lot of it is driven by entrepreneurs, by business who see this huge opportunity. We just have to make sure we're enabling it at a political, at a government level. So that's the big opportunity piece. I think the challenge piece is there's always going to be people living in the past, hoping to squeeze a little more profit out of fossil fuels and interfere with the wheels of progress. So I think we still have work to do dealing with that, the misinformation, the fact that somehow that it isn't about climate change, and that it isn't about clean air. There's still all the spin that that natural gas is more affordable and people should have a choice, and that. We can't go there. We have to move forward and progress to renewable energy, and clean things up and create all the opportunities that come with that. So, we can't take it for granted. And in a lot of parts of the world, it's going to be even tougher. I think the fossil fuels are almost all of the energy supply right now, still in many places, notwithstanding all the growth that's happening. And it'll be a tougher pathway to phase that stuff out and clean up cities.
Now, it's always lovely to be able to advise as a former mayor. So, biggest challenge, biggest opportunity for Rio?
I'll say the biggest challenge still is, and that's not only for Rio, I think it's for every city, but when you look at the Global South, I think that's even a bigger challenge, which is the communications of it. And the communication, I mean, it's a matter of, when you talk about climate change, I mean, obviously, in Vancouver, from that perspective, you face problems, but I mean, people understand a little bit better. I mean, when you go to a country like Brazil, people will always say, "Come on!" I mean, we have so many health issues, we have so many social security issues, we have so many, inequality issues. I mean, are we going to waste our time dealing with climate change? Don't be crazy, So this is. When I look at cities like Rio in the Global South, I think this is the greatest challenge. I mean, how can you make it clear to people that this has nothing to do with, crazy environmentalists, that there's always that image, that this is nothing to do with my everyday life. It has a lot to do. So I think that's a great challenge. And I see the biggest opportunity, it's something that Mayor Robertson already said here, but the issue of climate change, it brings such amount of great opportunities on innovation, job creation, and that was not clear a few years ago. You know, there was, okay, are you, if you are for climate, you're against development. If you're for climate, you're against jobs. And that's completely different these days. You know, if you're for climate, you are for innovation. If you are for climate, you are for jobs. If you are for climate, you are for economic growth. And come on, it's a big thing here. Can you imagine what that means to the global south? So I think that's the greatest opportunity. It's still in the communications crowd.
Fantastic. We have some traveling mics. Can I see who's holding the mics? We have Aretha and Kian. I'm going to take, I've asked permission. We're going to hear 2 questions and then go back to Eduardo and Mayor Robertson. So first question here, and second question, Dr. Echeverri there. There we go.
Hi, my question is for Gregor Robertson. My name's Thomas Cheney. I'm a biofuels consultant. Has the City of Vancouver looked at the possibility of municipalizing the natural gas grid, as Fortis BC seems to be bombarding me with advertisements online about how bad the City of Vancouver is being, and maybe just buying them out might solve the problem?
Fine. Okay, so hold on that. Dr. Echeverri? Very quickly.
Thank you very much for your leadership. Canada, it's a greater place thanks to what you're doing, and thanks for standing up to power. It's needed right now. We're in dark times. My comment/question is, would you consider growing renewable cities beyond its current room? You have a beautiful, beautiful conference center in the waterfront. I saw it this morning, and it accommodates thousands of people. You have no idea how important it is for those of us that come from different parts of the world to gather here and grow this huge. So that's my question. And we give and take. We will create the International Renewable Energy Academy every year after your renewable cities out east. And that way we're going to start changing the world year by year. So hopefully you'll take my question.
Oh my goodness. So there we go. Municipalizing the natural gas.
Might make life easier. So the gas industry it was public once upon a time. BC Gas was our gas utility for the province. It was privatized, and now it's Fortis BC has essentially owns the gas industry in our province. And there is a BC Utilities Commission that's appointed by the Premier, and that is charged with making sure that all the utility-based decisions, energy decisions in the province are fair, serve the public. And it's the BC Utilities Commission, though it is a politically appointed commission, has made a series of decisions against what a new private utility, called Creative Energy, who are trying to switch the fuel from natural gas to renewables here in Vancouver. There have been a couple of decisions now by the BC Utilities Commission against that activity, which has been really unfortunate. It's slowed down what we thought was going to be another private utility that owns the whole central heat, was what it was called, the steam system that heats all the buildings downtown, almost all the buildings. So they're trying to get off natural gas, and that's being blocked by the Utilities Commission. So I think we're in a bizarre predicament where it seems like the forces of government and the natural gas utility are acting in kind of self-defense and trying to protect the monopoly they have over the heat that's created within the city. And we're trying to, as a city, we're trying to go 100% renewable and trying to support that shift. It's a difficult shift to engineer right now, in particular because natural gas is so cheap. We're burning, most of the gas that we're burning here in Vancouver is fracked gas from northern BC. It's very cheap. Globally, gas prices have been extremely low in recent years, and our renewable electricity prices have been going up. And making it so the consumer decision around renewable electricity versus fracked natural gas means the cheaper route is shifting to natural gas and burning fossil fuels. I don't think at a consumer level people are as attuned to it as they should be, and we're trying to get the information out now. It is a communications challenge, and that's at the core of a lot of our struggle right now, and what we need to shift here is more education, more sense that we need to make this shift, and we need support of the provincial government, the citizen body that's charged with oversight, the Utilities Commission. That should all be a constructive process right now, and unfortunately it's broken, and we're at a point where it's a quagmire. We're unable to make that shift. The private utility that wants to go to renewables doesn't have the business case for it unless there's a bigger carbon tax that puts a true price on fracked natural gas. So we've got a particular mess there that we need to clean up, and beyond that, our real focus as a city is energy efficient buildings. The more energy efficient we can make our buildings, that's what our zero emission building code is all about. As aggressively as we can, we take the need for burning or consuming energy out of our building stock, make it more energy efficient, then we don't have to produce renewable or non-renewable energy. So that's our primary goal, is energy efficiency, and then we're trying to tackle the communications and structural challenges with the natural gas utility and the government role provincially in regulating that.